Gates comes along, and he's a college dropout, and he's given the opportunity to create the operating system for the IBM personal computer. Now, I was in the computer software business at this time, and I can just guarantee you that virtually everyone who heard about this wondered what was in back of it. Because even at that point, before the personal computers had become, basically in everyone's bedroom, people could see that they were going to be basically ubiquitous. There was no question that these were going to be everywhere. And no one could understand why IBM would give away the creation of the operating system to someone who couldn't code, someone who wasn't really a software designer, and someone who had no business. At the time that Gates created the relationship, he didn't even have an operating system. He actually bought DOS from some guy who lived down the street. It was just a very primitive operating system, full of bugs. It got better, of course, over time, but the creation of the relationship to Gates was very suspicious. And of course, in hindsight, it is clear that Gates was part of the guild that had in mind this kind of cultural control. And then you have to see the personal computer, and of course the iPhone, this thing that everyone now stares at all day long. That this comes out of Silicon Valley, and it comes out of MK Ultra, right? If you look at like Stuart Brand, for example, he is on the bus. He is a merry prankster. He is basically working with Ken Kesey, the MK Ultra employee. There's his background is military intelligence. And he's actually the individual who came up with the name personal computer. He's the individual who created the press conference that the mouse was introduced to the public. And you have to wonder again. It's sort of like feminism, without kind of being able to move back and sequence and see how these things develop. It's hard at the present time to sort of see, what was in back of all this. You have to remember that the MK Ultra project came out of the Macy conference. And at the Macy conference, you had the cybernetics conferences. These were particular conferences inside of the Macy conference, which were studying how humans could be programmed. The term cybernetics comes out of this. And the people who were there were actually talking about how they could code humans. And so the idea of the personal computer was just to basically begin the process by which they could control individuals' behavior, right? If you look at the iPhone and you think about the connections to military intelligence that Google and Facebook have, and you look at the fact that has now been released that every iPhone ever made has been hacked by the CIA so that they can monitor activity, right? And monitor email, what you're doing in the email. They know where you are. Then now, of course, they're actually watching, financial transactions going on. So why would they do, what was the plan? Because as we look at it today, the iPhone is such a handy gadget. Well, how could this be wrong? Well, you always have to think about the reason that these things were created, because and why. Because this will tell you what the people who control them today are actually doing. If you can answer the questions at the beginning, right? When you look at the cybernetics conferences inside the Macy, and when you study the work of Norbert Wiener and Johann von Neumann, you can see they're talking about you can control human beings, you can program them, you can code them like a machine, right? Now, then as you trace these individuals going forward, and you can see the circumstantial evidence that always links them together, then you can see this is really what they have in mind. I mean, these are just ways to give government an observation power that is, like the Police song, every step you take, every move you make, I'll be watching you. And of course, the drummer, Stuart Copeland, was, his father was one of the founders of the CIA with Bateson. And so these songs, they seem harmless. They get into our mind, but believe me, there is malevolence in back of them, and they do intend to be able to have a complete observation of all humans that during this process while population is being reduced.
What's interesting, you mentioned this cybernetic agenda behind Silicon Valley and the personal computer and the iPhone and sort of the ubiquitousness of all this technology. The Internet of Things, where our toasters spy on us. That wasn't just Kelly Ann Fitzpatrick who said that. I think it was the former director of the CIA said that in a congressional hearing, that your utilities, your refrigerator, your toaster would have to take the ability to surveil you.
Your micro.
Yeah, micro, whatever. But I did a recent interview with Dr. Joseph Farrell, and he wrote a book called Rotten to the Common Core. And in that book, he didn't so much focus on the standards, which gets most of the attention. The critics of Common Core, he focused on the fact that on its electronic standardized testing and the surveillance potential or agenda behind it. And in researching that book, he came up with the connection between the electronic testing service, I think it was developed out of Harvard University, to the human ecology fund.
Yeah.
So that of course, you mentioned Human Ecology Fund. That's CIA. That's UN Cameron. That's MK Ultra. So from the get-go, the standardized testing is a way of monitoring, of tracking, and classifying every student in the country.
Exactly, and they could then see, if there's a particular class that is troublesome, like very high scores in English, then they would have a heads up as to which group they needed to do extra monitoring of.
Yeah.
Because now once they have them identified through the SAT or the different tests, the standardized intelligence so-called tests that are given to the students, then they could refine this with these expertise knowledge, and then say, okay, this group, these 5,000 people have the intelligence, and by their internet activity, we can see they're at the wrong websites. So now we have to go to the next level of surveillance.
Yeah, and right? this should all be done through a complex algorithm. So we're all being more or less virtually or digitally classified and filed. We all have a control file. But he made a point, just with standardized testing, with electronic testing, that you get a question, and you have to, with your number 2 pencil, you got to pick the right answer. And you say you get a history question of who killed President John F. Kennedy. Right? I mean, John Wilkes Booth, B, Sirhan Sirhan, C, Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm not going to have D, a confluence of interests representing elements within the national security state, organized crime, the Mossad. You're not going to have that, So but there's a system of reward and punishment here, because if you give the right answer, the politically correct answer, you get the higher score. So it's a way of standardizing and dumbing down everything as well, knowledge and information. Yeah.
Exactly right. This is how we're socialized.
Yes.
There's all these different means that socialize us, and if you are aware, you can see them just everywhere inside the media culture. They're just everywhere. Basically every movie has elements of it. And so that's why I'm saying that we're at a point where we have to really work hard to defend ourselves and defend our children so their minds can develop naturally. And so that means you cannot let them experience modern media. It's a weapon. Mm-hmm. I know this is a tough nut to crack because it makes sleepovers a little complicated, but that's just how it is. If you want your kids...
That's the most difficult thing, is because all around you it's happening. You can do what you can, but their friends and if they do go to a regular school, which is nothing, you also have to consider pulling a kid out of the normal methods of education, modern education, because that's weaponized as well too. So
absolutely. I mean, I hate to say it, but public education is simply it's just a cesspool and a weapon. Of course, in California, if you want to be in the public schools, you've got to have your kid take 67 vaccinations.
So, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right off the bat, if you're a parent and you want to protect your children, I would suggest doing a little research into the dangers of vaccinations and to the absolute lack of any kind of evidence that they are effective at preventing any sort of disease or mortality. And so, you've got to stand up for your child, which is to say you organize yourself into educational groups. I mean, homeschooling is just becoming more and more popular. And I mean, this is obviously just necessary. And then socialization within the homeschooling component, where you can kind of arrange for people to be around the child that are not there to do damage, and so that's what just a parent has to do these days. And so everyone should support this, even if you don't have children. People should try to support it as best they can, offer to volunteer just to help parents, make these achievements. Because, if we want to create culture for the future, have a culture in the future, have any existence in the future, we need another generation. And you're not going to produce anyone who's clear-minded through the public school system and the pornography culture.
Yes. Now, you were talking about Bill Gates and the legend of Bill Gates, and a lot of people seem to think that, again, he is a lifetime actor, and the story doesn't really add up. He seemed to have been, like, maybe with Microsoft was maybe a tax dodge or some way to get around antitrust laws or something. But
Microsoft was just they wanted to get the operating system of what they were going to have as their common platform for observation of humans, and they wanted to move it away from IBM because IBM was already seen as something that was kind of like Big Brother.
Yes.
So with Apple, which is, sort of like the Rolling Stones to the Beatles, basically Apple to Microsoft,
That's right, yeah.
You had this idea that it was a kind of rebellion, against IBM. I mean, this is how they set these things up. So
it's a Revenge of the Nerds versus, the cool Steve Jobs. It's like if you want to sell something, you need a Ronald McDonald or a Betty Crocker. So you get these guys, you get a face to sell the product. It's Bill Gates. And he represents a certain type, and then there's Steve Jobs, and he's a certain type.
And it just keeps getting a little more radical because you start out with IBM, then you have Bill Gates, and he's kind of this nerdy guy, but he's eccentric and he's different than IBM, right? He's he's part of this new generation of hackers, But then beyond him, now you have Jobs. Well, Jobs takes LSD, and he's a famous drug user, and now this is surely someone that the youth culture can embrace as products. And then, wow, lo and behold, here comes the iPhone and the iPod. Wow, what an amazing trajectory. And, you end up with these things all staring at your face. And then, like 2 weeks ago, you learn that, oh, by the way, the CIA has hacked every single iPhone.
Yeah.
They have technology to look at every single. So all of this time, you've been sitting there conditioning yourself, learning how to type with your thumbs and exchanging, tweets with your internet circle, you have been observed, right? Mm-hmm. Your ability to have privacy and, unreasonable search and seizure has been violated, right? The intelligence community, which people should understand is a secret society, right? Democracy does not penetrate into this. No one that has any understanding whatsoever of what's going inside the CIA's headquarters, right?
And someone like Bill Gates, who becomes a celebrity, of course, a multi-billionaire.
Sure.
At one time, officially the richest man in the world. Probably it wasn't true, of course. But he uses his capital, his moral or cultural capital. Then he creates his foundation with his wife Melinda, and they're out there promoting GMO vaccinations.
Yeah,
the whole agenda. Right? They're out there.
It's just absurd.
Yeah.
But that's the lifetime actor. He creates the trust and then he delivers the blow. This is what people need, how people need to organize themselves to be able to, defend children. Is they've got to be able to identify when the lifetime actor is coming at them, with a load of weaponized anthropology.
Yeah, I was reading an article about Silicon Valley in anticipation of this interview by Bill Blunden. Silicon Valley sells the illusion of security, and this you get into this false conflict between these tech nerds and the government. And this is what he writes. He goes, the truth is that government is more than happy to cede power and authority just as long as doing so serves the corporate factions that have achieved state capture. The empire Glenn Greenwald speaks of is a corporate empire in concrete analytic results that affirm Thomas Ferguson's investment theory of party competition. Researchers from Princeton and Northwestern University conclude that multivariate analysis indicates that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while the average citizen and mass-based interest groups have little or no influence. Now here's the kicker. The primacy of security theater. Certainly, large high-tech companies care about quarterly earnings. That definitely explains all the tax evasion, wage ceilings, and slave labor. But these same companies would be hard-pressed to actually protest user privacy because spying on users is a fundamental part of their business model. Like government, corporate spies collect and monetize oceans of data. Furthermore, high-tech players don't need to actually bulletproof their products to win back customers. It's far more cost-effective to simply manufacture the perception of better security, slap on some crypto, flood the news with public relation pieces, and get some government officials, example given James Comey, Robert Hannigan, and Stuart Baker, to whine visibly about the purported enhancements in order to lend the marketing campaign's credibility. The techno-libertarians of Silicon Valley are masters of security theater. Sorry.
And that's exactly right. Yeah. And it is theater, and that is the correct word, because anytime they want to ratchet up, the surveillance, they can simply stage a terrorist event and have the people use iPhones to communicate, and then they can say, well, we need this new gizmo to be able to look at everybody. Lifetime actors, it's just you've got to be able to identify them. And one individual that I think is very useful to study in this regard is Gloria Steinem. Mm-hmm. I think people should look at how she came on the scene, how she became out of nowhere the representative of feminism. I mean, this was what was so confusing to what was called the Red Stockings, which were the old line kind of Marxist feminist group that were, I think, just legitimate, individuals with economic issues. But somehow just Steinem just comes out of nowhere. And if you look at how she is promoted, and then try to back calculate from there to like Kim Kardashian, Miley Cyrus. I mean, all of these individuals, or even Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. These are they're handpicked puppets basically. And then once the planning is in place, they just either burst onto the scene, or like in the case of Miley Cyrus, they have a reason for developing her from a young age. With Miley Cyrus, she was developed from a young age, so you'd have a lot of identification with her person from young girls, right? So she had this Hannah Montana character as like an 8, I don't know what she started, maybe 10 years old through 14. But then her transition into the Whore of Babylon, Miley Cyrus, is overnight, right? She just bursts on the scene as the Whore of Babylon, and every single magazine is covering her, right? The whole Time Warner empire is just falling around like, she's an important person. But the question is why? Well, this is weaponized anthropology, folks. This is what we're experiencing.
And this is in each of these cases, you need, I guess, parents who are willing to sell off their children for money or fame. And
well, I think they're probably just they're it's like with the Grateful Dead. I mean, the Grateful Dead, there's been a lot of research done into them, and the thing that's probably the most important about the Grateful Dead is that they're from Masonic families, if you go into their family background, the Courtney Cox's father, Hank Harrison, was the band handler. And he was in an interview where, they asked him, well, why were all of the pamphlets and all of the early representations of the Grateful Dead, even when they were the Warlocks, before they were dead, why is it all Freemasonry? Why is there nothing but the all-seeing eye and the temples of Joaquin and Boas and nothing but Freemason imagery? And he goes, well, it's easy to answer. He goes, we're all from Masonic families. That's why. And so really, I mean, isn't that a little unusual, right? I mean, did it have something to do with the creation of the band? And so it's, what you get to, Tim, is you always, if you dig a bit, when you get to weapons, you typically find that the family has some kind of connection into Freemasonry or into government intelligence, right? I mean, Jim Morrison's father was the admiral of, the Gulf of Tonkin episode. Frank Zappa's dad was, this chemist that was working for the CIA and LSD. I mean, and then the dead have nothing but Masons. So it's the secret societies that are formed so that they can conduct malevolence without being observed, right? I mean, that's why the societies are secret. They're not secret because they're trying to figure out how they can be benevolent. That's the secrecy is necessary because they're doing evil to you, to us, and that's why we are not permitted inside. And so this is why, like I keep saying, we've got to have, and this would be a way to, we can make progress in terms of democracy, is we need this DNA database. We need to insist that every single person who's running for office would submit voluntarily to some kind of DNA database. And then we need to get a collection of all the media individuals, finance, media moguls, rock stars. We need to start creating a database of democracy so that when someone comes into culture and starts damaging it, we can see if there's any connections into a long-standing family of destruction, right? So that we know we're being attacked, that this individual is in some kind of existential phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. There's a plan here that is working against us in the fact that, these families go back into Freemasonry or into Skull and Bones. It's like Cord Myers, the individual that hired, Gloria Steinem. I mean, his connections are right into Skull and Bones, through his wife and other members in his family. I mean, you don't have to dig too hard to see these connections. And that's really this is the real critical research goal. People like you and I, we do our best. We have the shows. We spend a lot of time. And we can even become more effective. I work with groups. I work with, a lot of individuals. We try to exchange information. But this really is an all-hands work party. I mean, every citizen out there needs to participate in this.